So since last time, I've started to introduce enemies into the game. As you can see, we've got a new slime enemy here. And if we click on him, you see he's got a bunch of new components associated with him. The first one to note is the AI mover, which works with the navmesh agent, which then uses a navmesh to be able to navigate the environment. The best way I can demonstrate this is by using this AI move logic. So this basically allows me to set patrol or pursue of various targets. So if we set it to patrol, and we've got our target here, which is this patrol, you can see that I've got this whole patrol point system that we can set up. These can be clicked and dragged and moved around. They also have different commands that can be added. So once he arrives at this certain point, he waits or he turns to face a certain direction. And these all have handles that I can move around and customize however I want. He's going to move to this point, then to this point, then to this point. So we could, for example, put in the second point a wait of 1 second and a turn. So it turns to face this direction and then it moves over here. So this has a bunch of other options, so we can set the stopping distance or whatever, and we can also change if it moves forward through the path or if it goes backwards. So if it was going forwards, it would go to this point, to this point, to this point. But if it was going backwards, it would go from this point to this point to this point. But then we also have some other options, such as palindrome and random. So random's kind of self-explanatory, or just pick a random point from those three and then go to that one and then whatever. Whereas palindrome is kind of like, it will go from 1 to 2 to 3, back to 2 to 1. To 1, 2, and turns to 3, and then it will go back to 2. So that's what the palindrome is. There's a few issues with the whole patrol logic stuff, so I need to fix those, but I haven't got round to them yet. Instead, I've been working on some other features, so we'll get into those. So the first major one is this AI detect script. So if I show the handle, you can see we've got this big vision cone now. So we can kind of change the angle of this, or we can change the range of it, how much of an area it will see. So when we walk into it, it will start to detect. But he'll then turn to us and then start chasing us. So this is what it will look like actually in game. So when we walk into this area, it will start coming up this question mark and it will fill up. So when this question mark fills to the top, it will then turn to yellow, and that means he's suspicious, so he's looking in our general direction at the moment. And when that fills up, he then alerts, an animation plays and he starts to chase us. So there's quite a lot of settings we can set here. So we've got like how long it will take at the very edge or at the very center of this vision cone. But the one of note is this hot zone here. So if we extend this out, we'll see that we've now got this little red area. And anybody who enters this red area instantly gets detected. So this is kind of our suspicious area. If you're in here, you'll kind of go, what's that? But when you're in the red area, it'll go, oh, there's somebody there, and then start pursuing. Basically putting your detect score up to 100%. As we walk into that, it'll instantly start chasing us. So this all works as expected, but how is this all working? And this is where it starts to get a bit more complicated. So you'll see that we've got another script here called an AI Behaviour Manager. So if I press to open this window will come up. And this is basically where we program the AI entirely. So down the one side we've got states, and then we've got these behaviors. So a state would be the kind of situation the enemy's currently in. So we've got unaware, suspicious, alert, and this is just one that I was using for testing purposes. Basically we can add new, we can delete, we can copy them, we can do loads of different things. So in a state we have behaviors, so we can add new here. So if we were to create a new behavior and say this is to, I don't know, detect target. So we've got calls, conditions, actions on success, and actions on failure. So a call is when it's going to be called. So the generic ones are as soon as the program starts, on every frame, so on update, when a state is entered or a state is exited, so when it goes into a new state. And then the last ones are on an actor's death or on an actor being hit. If we were to say on update, and the condition is one of these, so we've got like positional ones, we've got time, cooldowns, countdowns, compare, like a float ball, and then competitive. So I'm not going to go into too much depth. I'll just explain the actual program that I've created so you can kind of see how it kind of works. This is called the any state. This runs at all times, so it doesn't matter what state you're in. It could be in unaware or suspicious or alert or test. This one will always run. So typically this any state is good for setting our initial state, our default state. So for this one, we go set unaware. So when the program starts, it sets to unaware. Generic on start, no conditions, change state to unaware. So then it moves to unaware. So the moment it goes into unaware, it sets to a patrol. So you'll see there's this little tick button here. So we can turn the patrol on and off. So it basically turns this behavior on or off. But on state enter, so when it enters the unaware state, it goes to a patrol. And then while it's in this state, it has an update on this detect call behavior where it calls a detection. So this AI detect script over here is being called through this AI behavior. So this is constantly being called every frame while we're in unaware. And then we have this condition here. So on update, when the detection score is greater than 0.5, we change state to suspicious. So when the blue icon reaches to maximum, it then changes to yellow, and we're in a suspicious state now. And then that's where that goes from. So in theory, we could put this behavior and this behavior into one by simply going, so we take this condition here, so condition, compare, float, detection score is equal or greater than 0.5, and then on success, we change the state to suspicious, and then on a failure, we actually call detect, call event, standard all. So in the case it sees the character, it goes to suspicious, and then we call this, and it's a similar type of thing again. When the score reaches 1 this time, it goes to alert, otherwise detect the main target that is tracking already. So as we enter the alert state, it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So on enter, we go into the pursue state, so it starts to chase the player basically. So similar to like in the unaware, when we enter unaware, it enters a patrol state. Here it's entering a pursue state. Then it calls a gesture of alert. So gestures are animations that there's a whole animation setup thing that I'll show in a minute as well. So it'll call that animation, and then when it's done, it will call. So what it can actually call is another one of these behaviors straight after when the animation's complete. But at the moment it's just set to none, so nothing will happen. It'll call an animation, whether it's alert, and then it will resume what it was doing, which is the pursue. And then we can start to introduce attacks. So we've got this bite attack here. So if we enable this, so every frame is checking to see if the enemy is stunned, if they're not stunned, and if there is not an animation playing at this time, it then checks if they're within this range or within this angle. So we can see this visually actually in the editor here. So we've got these little handles that we can move backwards and forwards and like make wider or smaller. So this is the area of which when the player is within this area, it will trigger this bite attack. So as you can see the enemies chasing me at the moment. There's that little green thing around the front of it. So when we enter that, it will start to do a bite attack. So this is what it looks like in game. So you can see he'll chase us and then like bite us, or try to bite us, depending if I can dodge out the way or whatever. So you'll start to see like the strength of this tool. So we can set up skills, like enemy skills and enemy behaviors by using this. Over time, I'm going to be developing this tool further, adding new conditions, new actions and calls and all this kind of stuff to give me more freedom of how I make enemies. I could do the same with bosses, Over here we've got location presets and references, which at the moment I'm not using, but they are set up. I'm going to have to make adjustments to them to suit this game a little bit better. But like our location presets is we can set specific locations in the map and go move to this location when certain conditions met. So you can imagine with a boss fight, you could have like the boss teleports to a different part of the room and then starts doing an AoE attack across the map. I can program that all in and do it all visually through this tool. So another example here is we've got this slam attack. So here we've got a competitive condition. If a competitive behavior higher in the list is using the same call is successful, then this will return false for the next call. So if in the same frame this bite attack is successful, then this slam attack will always come out as false and it won't call it. So if we've got like multiple attacks that use a similar range, we don't want them all triggering at once. So that's the whole point of competitive. With this one in particular, we've got a cooldown of 4 seconds. So it can only trigger this every 4 seconds. And then again, we've got our range and angle. When we're in this range, he'll do his slam attack. And then again, it calls attack, slam. So I'll talk a bit more about the animations in a minute. So the enemy's pursuing us here. If we get too close, he'll do the bite attack. But if we're too far away, he'll do this, try and do this slam attack. And every 4 seconds, he can do that. So if we move over here. So as you can see now, we've got like a kind of fully functioning enemy. So as I said before, it's calling an animation here. So it's probably best to now move on to the animation scripts we've got. So over here, we've got our actor animations. So we can set up these different groups here. So we've got gestures, attacks, hit animations, and death animations. These two aren't used at the moment because I'm probably going to change the way this works a little bit. And I haven't introduced enemy death or player death yet. So those two are subject to change. But for now, we've got our gesture animations and our attack animations. In our gestures, we've got search and alert. So when we enter the alert state, it does that alert animation. So that's calling that. And then we've also got these two buttons at the bottom, which is update controller and removed unused states. So if I am to open this up, we've got our actual animation that it uses. And then we've got use exit transition and then a unique ID that is associated with this animation. And if I were to hit update controller, which I won't because I don't need to, it will actually create something like this all automatically. So if we then press onto our attacks, we'll see that bite and slam are now in here with their IDs. And all these transitions are automatically set up for us. So on the actual bite state, we've actually got this slime attack animation here. And we've got a bunch of scripts that are attached to it for other reasons. Some of these are ones that I've used previously. So like the move command is like when we attack with the player, they kind of move forward. This is the same kind of thing that we're using on enemies. So every time the AI tries to bite us, it will move forward slightly. So the other one we've got is this skill settings here. So we've got a skill here. And these are the same skills that we're using on the player. So it will call this. And then it'll call an FX. So now the slime has tried to bite us. It's actually spawned this slime bite prefab here. So this has no visual effect on it at the moment, but it's actually got a hit collider attached to it. And this measures like the actual area of which will hit the player. So this has got like loads of tools where we can expand this and shrink it and all that kind of stuff. And this again uses all of the asset loading functions that I've put in previously. So the bite goes off, it calls this little collider that then hits the player, and then that calls another effect, which is the little hit thing. So if we do this, you'll see that it'll do this like little hit splash thing. It's placeholder at the moment, it'll be different as time goes on, but this is how all this works. And then the last one is we've got a move pause here, so we can set a starting frame and an ending frame, or in this case just a normal time, of when the enemy can move and when the enemy can't move. So this is what stops them from pursuing us when it attacks. So it's actually locked in place for this duration. Now when we move on to the slam attack, we've got, again, these scripts are there again, but we've actually got this track movement one, and we've got hyper armor. So first of all, the track movement what it's basically doing is it's seeing where the players run to, and it's trying to predict the best place to jump to try and hit the player. So as you can see, it's kind of moving toward the player. So the other script is Hyper Armor. So Hyper Armor is when an enemy's getting hit during an animation, do they get interrupted or not? So the basic attack, when he hits us with a basic attack, he doesn't have Hyper Armor. So if he were to go to attack us and we were to hit him, we interrupt him. But with his leap attack, we can't interrupt him. So if we try and trigger that and then try and hit him, you'll see that I can't actually interrupt him. But we're still hitting him and dealing damage. If we go back to the Hyper Armor, we've actually got invulnerability here. So if I were to turn this on, it means when we actually hit the enemy during his jump, he actually doesn't take any damage at all. And you'll see that there's no hit marker to tell us that we're hitting him, even though we're obviously hitting him. So there's a lot of features here that I've introduced. It's very hard to keep track of them all and kind of explain them all because there's so many new things being added. And a lot of these things aren't perfect yet. There's still a lot of issues that need to be fixed. As you can see, when we're trying to run into an enemy, we get kind of stuck on them and we can't walk through them. But there's going to be times where we want to pass through enemies. So I've had to introduce collider exclusions. So when we're doing a dodge, for example, it's checking in front of us at all times to see if there's any enemies that are in our way. And then it marks them as an exclusion. When we do it to this, we can actually dodge through the enemy. So this can also be applied to enemies. So when they do the jump attack, for example, we can pass through the player, so we don't have these weird collision issues. But then there's also the case of where what happens when we dodge and we end up inside the enemy. So as you can see, we're actually stood inside him at the moment, and the collision's turned off. But then when we leave, the collision turns back on. So if we run towards him when he does it, we can actually run through him. And then with his like normal attacks, we can like dodge through him. But if I were to dodge to him, so that I'm inside, he'll continue to attack, but he can still hit me. So when we hit enemies now, they actually get knocked back. You'll notice that there's this cylinder here. And this cylinder represents the agent for the navigation. So while this is active, while it's like bright, it means it's using the nav mesh, which is that blue area that I showed earlier. So when we hit him, we'll notice that it's actually turning off and then turning back on, and he kind of jolts a little bit. That's because I haven't set it up like completely perfectly yet. But what it's doing is it's turning the navigation off and then turning physics on instead, so we can actually knock him around. Now, the reason I've had to do it this way is because of a few issues. So if I just quickly bring up the navigation. So here's our nav mesh. So if I were to choose this middle section here and turn it off, we've now got a big hole in the middle of the arena. So if we were to leave it as this and just play it, you'll notice that the enemy will actually just walk across this hole as if there's nothing there. It doesn't care. It'll just float along the floor. Whereas we will fall down the hole. That's because we haven't updated the nav mesh yet. So if we bake this, you'll notice that now I've got this like hole here. So first of all, the issue with him walking over this hole is now solved. However, we've got a new issue. So if I were to hit the enemy so then he slides, and try and slide him onto the edge, you'll notice he just stands still. He cannot move because he's no longer on the nav mesh. Now if I were to just reactivate his navigation, if I go here and we go to the slime and we re-click this, you'll notice he'll jump from where he is over onto the nav mesh again and then start to move again. So I wanted to avoid this problem. So to solve the problem, I need to eliminate this edge here. So the way I solve this is by creating this pit maker. Basically, we choose the size and the center of this box here to mark out our pit. And then when we press generate pit, it creates a surface and then some walls. So this surface has a special layer for it. And these walls are like actual walls that are underneath to stop the AI from falling out of here or falling down into like basically the abyss down below. At some point there'll be like a trigger in here that detects that the enemy's in here, and then it will instantly kill them and then put the loot that they drop up by the edge of the pit. But what else this pit generates is a couple of modifiers for our nav mesh. So if I were to actually bake this now, you'll notice that the area that was once grey has now turned to this purple colour. So this is actually like a different walkable area. The blue has a higher priority than this, so it will only ever walk on this little bit of ground when it absolutely has to and there's no other choice. So as you'll see, he'll now walk right on the edge. The centre of him, the very central point, is where he's walking, so he will never go on this purple bit unless he absolutely has to. So in the case where we hit him and he lands on the purple, he will still be able to walk on it, but he'll walk straight off it so he can continue to pursue us. But this also means now we can actually hit the enemy and push him down the hole. As you can see, he's just chilling here in the bottom of this pit. So we've reactivated all the aspects of the enemy now, so he'll continue to jump and try and bite us and all those kinds of behaviours, and it'll all kind of work relatively well. There's still a few issues here and there, like a few physics issues that I'm having, which I'll iron out over time. There are like a few other issues, so one notable one is with doors. So obviously the system needs to be developed and changed a lot anyway, but say if we're in this situation where we try and open a door and we need to run through him, he'll just stay in our way and we'll just keep running for eternity and he'll keep hitting us. The other thing is we can't die. When we get to 0 HP, we'll just continue to get hit and the game will play normally because I haven't added into like deaths and all that kind of stuff yet. And it's the same with the enemy. The enemy's kind of immortal at this point. So issues like this, I'm going to solve these with time, but at the moment they're kind of broken. The game's kind of completely broken now. The only way I can fix it is if I grab the enemy and move him out my way, and then I'll walk through the door. And that concludes this update. Next time we're going to continue to improve the AI. I'm thinking about trying to break my progress down into shorter, more frequent videos by trying to go against my nature and be concise. If you like what you see and you want to see where the project goes, be sure to subscribe. To support the project, I have a Patreon, currently with 4 awesome patrons, but outside of supporting me there, just leaving a like and a comment go a long way in the war against the algorithm gods. Last time I showed my early development of the level system, so if you're interested, press here. And if you want to do none of that, would you kindly bugger off?
Maybe.